We've already established in the Zap Turn Dose video that Zapdos EX is a very powerful card. Because of Legendary Ascent, it can come out of nowhere and hit for heavy damage. There are plenty of electric types that help accelerate energy into play, making this an early game threat if you choose to play a super fast version of it like Zap Turn Dose. That deck is meant to go as quickly as possible, hit your opponent as hard as you can, destabilize their board state by knocking out their key players, but this deck can run out of steam very quickly since you are putting all of your resources into getting that Zapdos on turn 2 or 3. If your opponent is able to break that momentum and re-stabilize, the deck can fall down very quickly in the mid to late game. When you are playing tournament Pokemon, you can't afford that risk. You have to include your own means of stabilizing, even at the cost of not being able to combo off on turn 2. That version of Zapdos EX is the deck we are talking about today, ZRE. But I actually want to start by talking about the Pokemon that is not in the acronym of the deck's name. Magmar from Team Rocket Returns is an absolute treasure for any deck that wants energy in the discard, because not only is it going to serve as an outlet to get those energy from your hand directly into your discard, it's also going to draw you a bunch of cards for doing so. For a lot of decks, this is just a preferable version to Delcatty. This is a basic Pokemon, and yes, you do have to attack, but in a deck like ZRE, you don't care if your setup takes a few turns because the payoff is well worth it. You're not accelerating any energy into play. You do have the option with that deck, but you would much rather start filling your discard full of energy cards with Magmar as your starting Pokemon. Because another of this deck's big power pieces is Electrode EX. Its Pokepower Extra Energy Bomb lets you knock out Electrode EX, giving your opponent 2 prize cards, but in exchange, you are searching your discard pile for 5 energy cards and attaching them to any of your Pokemon in any way you like, as long as they are not Pokemon EX. Which that EX clause does not matter with Extra Energy Bomb, as you will see when we talk about the Z and the R portions of this deck. So with Electrode EX's power, you can see how important it is to ramp up your discard pile with Magmar in the early game. Not only are you filling your discard with energy so that Electrode EX can slap them right back into play on one of your big threats, but you're also drawing a bunch of cards, meaning that you are going to be able to draw into those big threats. Like Rayquaza EX, it has the Dragon Boost power. Whenever you play it from your hand onto your bench, you may move any number of basic energy cards attached to your Pokemon to Rayquaza EX. An amazing loophole for getting around that EX clause that Electrode EX has. In its power, you're not moving the energy from your discard onto a Pokemon EX, you're moving them onto a Magmar, and then when you play Rayquaza EX from your hand, all of those energy just happen to go onto Rayquaza EX. You may leave 1 energy on Magmar just so you can retreat it if you don't have a switch in hand. At the point in the game where you filled your discard with energy using Magmar, and then you've evolved up into an Electrode EX, blown it up to get all of those energy from the discard into play, and then played your Rayquaza, you are going to have enough energy to start scoring consecutive knockouts with Spiral Blast, which is going to deal 20 damage for each basic energy attached to Rayquaza EX. A Pokemon with 2 relevant resistances and a hard-to-hit weakness. A lot of decks run Crystal Shard just so they can hit Rayquazas. It can still be a bit risky to load that much energy onto Rayquaza. You don't want to be giving your opponent 2 prizes with Electrode EX just to have your Rayquaza EX knocked out and put you 1 more KO away from losing the game. If your Rayquaza EX is in danger of being knocked out, you got another option. Slapping down a Zapdos EX from your hand, moving it into the active position, swapping out with that Rayquaza using Legendary Ascent, move 3 of the Lightning Energy onto Zapdos EX, and you are ready to fire off an Electron Crush. This was one of the most frustrating parts of playing against Turn Zapdos, was that you always just had to assume that the Zapdos was in hand, and that at any time It could go from their hand to their bench to the active position and be fully powered to hit you with an Electron Crush, which almost forced you to play defensively from turn 2, which is not what you really wanted to do in the EX era. You also wanted to go fast. ZRE took that idea even further. Not only did you have to worry about the same turn Zapdos EX drop, if your opponent had a Voltorb on their bench that you weren't able to deal with, you also had to assume that on that next turn, they're going to drop an Electrode, they're going to explode it, they're going to fully power anything that they have in their hand. It wasn't just Zapdos as a same turn threat, it was literally anything in the deck, including the game ender that was Rayquaza Star. If you wanted to pull off a big finish, you could hold the Electrode EX in your hand with this Rayquaza Star. On the same turn, retreat your active Pokemon to get a little more basic energy into your discard, putting Rayquaza Star in the active position. Drop the Electrode from your hand, blow it up, put all of that energy onto Rayquaza in the active position, and now you're dealing 100 damage to each of your opponent's Pokemon EX in the same turn that you play this card. Against a lot of decks in the metagame, this just wins you the game, because you're either playing against an opponent that has set up multiple stage 1 threats that were generally EXs with 90 to 110 HP. I mean, just look at the mirror match. If you played this card and fully powered a Holy Star against your opponent, you're knocking out every Rayquaza they have. And that's assuming that everything is clean on your opponent's side of the field, that they haven't taken any damage this game. By the time you drop this as your finisher, your opponent's going to have damage counters on their side of the field, so it's not like you're having to clean sweep everything. If you go back and read blog posts from players in this era, you will see plenty of stories of, yeah, I was at the World Championships and the opponent just dropped a Rayquaza Star and knocked out 3 of my EXs, took 6 prizes in the same turn. But this is really only your secret weapon against opposing EX decks. This card is really not going to do anything against an opponent playing a single prize deck because Spiral Rush is garbage. But it's only against opposing EX decks where you really need a secret threat to take care of these high damage output cards like Blaziken. When it comes to single prize threats, Zapdos and Rayquaza can handle those pretty well. Here we've got the sample deck list. You see that full playset of Magmar up there. That is your ideal start, but it also doesn't hurt to start with a Voltorb because you can accelerate an energy into play, which is going to help a later Zapdos EX drop, and also get the ball rolling, pun intended, on setting up that Electrode, blowing yourself up, getting a bunch of energy into your discard, which is as good as energy into play. A 2-2 for your main attackers in Rayquaza EX and Zapdos EX with that 1 silver bullet copy of Rayquaza Star, because it's a star Pokemon. You can only have 1 copy in there. If you ever want to build this deck in paper, God bless you, because that card's like $5,000, if not more at this point. And then into the trainer base, you're gonna see a lot of disruption. A full playset of Rocket's Admin, a playset of POW Hand Extension, a full playset of Energy Removal 2. You're already giving your opponent 2 or 4 prizes just by blowing up Electrode, so you really have to protect your active Pokemon, especially the Rayquaza EX since it only has 100 HP. The disruption is going to be your only means of playing defense while you are on hyper offense. Even within the draw power, you are getting extra benefit. TV Reporter and Rocket's Mission are going to draw you cards, but they're also going to let you chuck energy cards into the discard. A couple copies of Switch to help out on those turns where you want a Pokemon in the active position that is not Zapdos. Lynette's Net Search is going to help you go grab those Zapdos and Rayquaza cards. A couple copies of Strength Charm when you just need that extra little smidge of damage off of your battle math. That way, when we attack, we are getting KOs. We're not just barely missing those KOs. 1 copy of Battle Frontier for the regular Battle Frontier reasons. We've gone over it in 15 other videos so far. But also, 2 copies of Space Center, which are going to help shut down those opposing Wobbuffets that block EXs. Because if that Wobbuffet stays in play with an active body, the only damage you're dealing is with Voltorb and Magmar. This is a deck that is easy to pilot, but it's very difficult and takes a higher skill level to consistently win with it, because you have to balance out the number of Electrodes you're blowing up and giving your opponent 2 prizes each, with the reward of getting those 5 energy into play and putting them to use in the best possible way. Any deck with Electrode EX in it makes me feel super nervous, because what if I give my opponent 2 prizes and they have something up their sleeve a lot like a crazy Rayquaza drop that is just going to obliterate me next turn, knock out 2 EXs, and then that's the entire game. You have to be the one doing the fastest getting at the table before you done get got yourself. Because honestly, in a lot of cases, giving your opponent those 2 prizes also creates a false sense of security for your opponent, which you completely take advantage of once those 5 energy land on a Rayquaza. Giving them that Electrode EX knockout also allows you for some heavier disruption once you start playing Rocket's admin against them. That's the deck, you know the drill. Give me your thoughts down below. While you're doing that, I'm going to give you some of my thoughts about Rayquaza when I was playing through Ruby, Sapphire, and Emerald as a child. I always packed a Rayquaza on my post-game team. I really like Rayquaza, but even then, when I would see this thing, I'd throw it out of my Pokeball, it'd be battling in game for me. I go, man, I wish that this cool snake dragon had more than 2 teeth and wasn't wearing lipstick. Future sprites do a much better job of making Rayquaza look cooler and more imposing, but my mind always goes straight to the lipstick version from RSE. Hope to see you on the channel again for some more vintage Pokemon TCG content. If there's any type of content you want to see, let me know that as well, and I'll see what I can cook up. Have a wonderful day, and I will see you at the next one.